Hey everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Echavarria, and I am the International Committee Chair for Poor People's Army, also known as Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign. I am a first-generation immigrant from Colombia. I wanted to put a webinar together to get some information out, dispel US propaganda with what is happening in Venezuela. Past few months, there's been an escalation of 20 years of political and economic war on Venezuela by the United States. There were deportations of Venezuelans that were living in the United States to CICAT in El Salvador. Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, negotiated their return to Venezuela in exchange for CIA agents. Since early September 2025, the U.S. launched a series of military strikes on vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific Seas. They allege were involved in drug trafficking linked to Venezuela, part of Operation Southern Spear. 36 strikes so far with 150 people killed. In December and into January, U.S. forces have intercepted and seized multiple oil tankers alleged to be transporting Venezuelan crude oil. And on January 3rd, U.S. military bombed several cities in Venezuela and kidnapped President Maduro and his wife Celia Flores in Caracas and transferred them to New York, where they are facing narco-terrorism charges. Over 100 civilians and military were killed that day, and 32 Cuban military were killed. I'm honored to be in the company of someone with long-standing history dedicated to the Latin American struggle. After his presentation, we will open the floor for questions, or if you prefer, you can put your questions in the chat, and a co-host will present them for you. I want to introduce Hernán Vargas. He's a militant of the Communal Movement in Venezuela, former Minister of Communal Economy in Venezuela, and he is a spokesperson for ALBA Movimientos, which brings together more than 400 organizations from 25 countries who represent the richness and diversity of the anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, anti-racist, feminist, eco-socialist struggle. Thank you, Hernán. You can begin.
Thank you, Fe, and thanks for everyone. Greetings for all the comrades that are right now joining here. Well, basically, what I want to share with you, like for starters, it's about it's going from the point where we assume that what we have here now is mostly misinformation about Venezuela mixed with fake news. So from that point of view, I want to share with you some issues that are part of delivering the correct information about what's going on here in Venezuela, and also to open the discussion with you maybe. The first issue is that, well, right now, almost 2 weeks ago, where we have been victims of a brutal attack from the U.S. military forces. According to the public statements, something like 150 different aerial ships of combat in different grounds, as far as we know, and at the same time supported by 9 Navy ships of war in the Caribbean. One of them a nuclear submarine, and with the support of a lot of troops staged in Puerto Rico. So this attack has been a combination between electronical, digital, magnetical, and cynetical fronts of action. Basically, was a bloody act with, as Fe just mentioned, more than 100 people killed between civilian and military public servants. And at the same time, we have like injury people, more than 130 people injured at this time. It was not a surgical intervention. It was not a peaceful situation. It was a combat situation with over-dimension power against our possibilities. Venezuela is a peaceful country, so we don't have, of course, that military capacity of the U.S. And also, I have to mention that they use like a lot of technological superiority that we actually didn't know so far that it existed. Because here in Venezuela, we have been like having some cooperation in the military ground with Iran, China, Russia. So we have this humble defense system that, till our knowledge, could be enough in order to repel like some strike. But this overpass all this capacity by a lot. It was really a very high level that they use here. We think that they use some technology for the first time. So basically, the first issue is that we have been victim of a brutal attack using the whole military superiority of the United States. And that can be referred to all these mainstream fake news that talks about some kind of delivery, some kind of pact, some kind of surgical operation. It wasn't. It was nothing about that. It was an aggressive attack. I have to say that it happened in the going from the 2nd of January to the 3rd of January, in the most important holiday for us here in Venezuela, which is Christmas. Most of the people is with the families, resting. So at that point of the year, we thought that we won't have any attack besides of all the threats that we have had during the year. So it was a really coward maneuver against us. And of course, it has terrified a lot of people because sadly, all the things that we used to see or watch in the televisions, now we have seen in here in our country for the very first time. It's also the very first time in Latin America. We had never been victim of a direct military attack from a foreign army, from the US Army. They have attacked in different ways, but always indirect and with another kind of strategies. So that's the first issue. Then the second issue, it's about, I want to see that our answer, our response to that attack was immediately to stabilize the country, to guarantee the calm in most of the population. Venezuela is in the last 27 years have been part of a Bolivarian revolution process. This movement has been building like a whole organical force. So the main line of direction of that movement fortunately has took charge of the whole situation in order to guarantee the unity of the state, the military forces, the political forces, the powers, the main powers of the states has all been together in order to guarantee peace and also to guarantee the sovereignty of the country. So basically, we have put in the center the Bolivarian constitution, our national laws, in order to preserve that. Sadly, Nicolas Maduro, our president, has uh, have some plans of some scenarios about this possibility. So we have the national direction has discussed what to do in this kind of scenario. Of course, in the world, you never can prevent anything, everything. But in this scenario, we had some kind of guidelines about what to do. The main guideline that he prepared was a decree, a national decree of foreign commotion, which was elaborated thinking in this kind of a scenario where the U.S. could attack our country. So this decree basically established what to do in this kind of a scenario. It's like an act, it's like a law. It's formally called uh, in foreign commotion state decree. So basically to rule in this kind of a scenario. And it allows that in an scenario like this, which is not prevented in our constitution, it has the possibility that right now we preserve the figure of the presidency. Nicolas Maduro stays as president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, but Delcy Rodriguez as vice president stand forward in order to be like in charge by the momentarily. So that's part of this commotion decree. Also about has some guidelines in the military ground, in the economic, in the political issue. So basically to preserve the stability of the country according to our laws. So maybe what I have to say in this second issue is that far from that old fake news referring to treason and some internal plot against Nicolas Maduro, what we have seen is that facing this brutal military attack, the whole Bolivarian revolution has demonstrated unity from the level of direction to the grassroots. In the grassroots, we have been mobilized during these 2 weeks. All days we have had a national mobilization, mass mobilization, 1,000 of people demanding the liberation of our president. And that maybe is the third issue that I want to mention, that we have not only we have seen that it has gone over the picture all this narrative about narco-terrorism, about drug trafficking. It all has gone, and now we're facing the truth. It's about oil. It's about to taking control of Venezuela in order to assure the oil not to be sold to the China and Russia and to have control of it. But in that matter, what we want to say is not about narco-terrorism. It's about to control oil and to confront socialism, anti-imperialism, Bolivarian project. This is the real enemy of the United States. And by that, Nicolas Maduro is in jail basically as a prisoner of war. He has been taken, he has been kidnapped from Venezuela, of course, in an illegal move because they don't have formally declared war to Venezuela, but they have this prisoner of war. And now what we are facing is like a political trial in New York against Nicolas Maduro. They have already took back that idea of that he's the boss of a cartel of drugs that they call something like Soles Cartel, which is absolutely ridiculous. So ridiculous that even the same attorneys what are promoting this charge, they have took it back because he said we can prove that it's absurd, it doesn't exist. You can try to simulate that there is a cartel of drugs that doesn't exist. So again, the main issue here is that we don't have like narco-terrorism is not a war against narco-terrorism. It's about controlling the oil in Venezuela and about to promoting this change of regime. And basically, Nicolas Maduro is a prisoner of war, and that's the reason we are asking for the liberation because he's our president. And that's an important issue to mention. The first issue that I want to mention is that we have we didn't have a change of regime. We are under a bully attack. We have a military bullying from the US, which right now is actually telling that they will rule Venezuela and we need to obey what they say. Of course, they have shown us all the military power that they have. And basically, they just took apart the politics and now it's about military way to impose. 20 years ago, they tried to promote this free trade agreement for the whole America. Now, 20 years later, they are coming with the Navy ships and they're saying, this is the military way. What we couldn't achieve by political means, now we are gonna to impose it by political means. So basically, what we have seen during these last days in Venezuela, facing to that, is the tendency to calm, the trend to calm. I have to remember that we had 11 years of international sanctions, a blockade, framing a blockade situation here in Venezuela. So that one of the main consequences of that situation is that we have developed this culture of defense, the most important things, and that's peace. That's the necessity to work in order to guarantee the building of a future. So, that's what we have seen the last 2 weeks in Venezuela. Most of the people has, well, at this day, everything is normalized. Everyone is going to his job centers. Everyone is doing all the things that they need to do. This past week started the school period, the national school period and university. So basically, school, colleges, university, all of them has started the year as used to happen. So maybe what I have to say in this issue is that we don't have here in Venezuela any celebrations about the military attacks. And that's a sad thing to mention. Only in some countries, maybe in Spain, maybe in the US, you will see some Venezuelan migrants celebrating. And that's kind of sad, countries, because it's something like what happened to Cuba some decades ago, where they left a lot of people, which is against the Bolivarian Revolution, which is against socialism, which is also manipulated by the mainstream, by the whole mainstream, and they have had this culture aligned process of framing a culture of the migrant that sadly has had as a consequence that most of the Venezuelan migrants in another country could be supporters of Trump, could be far right supporters, are against Bolivarian government, And even more sadly, they are supporting the possibility of a military strike here in Venezuela, which is something absolutely absurd. No one who lives here could be supporting that, because basically it's threatening our whole life. We all Venezuelans felt like a lot of fear, like a lot of anguish about this possibility to the U.S. imposing things, changing our government, but most of all imposing a war situation just because they can. So that's something that all the people in Venezuela rejects, and that's the reality. They can try to sell us that that's a common state of mind of all Venezuelan. That's not true. In the last weeks, it has been like kind of popular that some Venezuelan migrants try to cancel the opinion of another fellas in the countries. And they said, you can talk about that if you are not Venezuelan. Well, I can say from here now that you can talk about the situation if you are Venezuelan, but you don't live here in Venezuela. So they are basically unplugged from our reality. They now live in another state of mind, which is aligned with the US interest, sadly, but that's the truth. The fifth issue that I want to mention is that basically what we are seeing now, and that's important to emphasize, that we are now in the process of defending the project that we have choose for our country, which is a Bolivarian project, which is supported by the Bolivarian Constitution, the national political constitution of our country. And it's referred about the possibility to have a project which defends the Bolivarian principles, which is about guarantee of social guarantees and social rights for most of the population, which is centered in the possibility of a substantial democratic system with participation and protagonism of most of the population. So basically, this system that I'm mentioning you is what we have been building during these 27 years. It's absolutely opposed to what you can see in the whole mainstream and the social network. They have basically built all these this all shield where the reality of Venezuela is basically banned. You can't see them. You can see that in anywhere. So only when you have this possibility to discuss like this, or maybe the one of you that can come here in Venezuela and see the reality. I have to say that in the last 11 years, it has been particularly difficult because the blockade has decreased the national income from oil. And that, of course, has generated negative consequences in our livelihood. But instead of that, we have managed, under the direction of the Bolivarian Revolution, to stabilize the economy. And as a consequence, you have seen that in the last 3 years, Venezuela has started economic growth, stabilization, political governability, basically. And the most important thing to say is that we have a national project of development, which is called National Bolivarian Socialist Plan, which is centered in five uh, historical goals, which are independence, socialism, developing of our forces, our productive forces, promoting a geopolitical model without imperialism, and more about multi-center pluripolar world, a new world order. And the fifth goal is about to defend the nature in order to prevent, in order to protect the life in our planet, because we are saying that capitalism is basically threatening the continuity of life in our planet. So from that plan, we have started developing a lot of policies, and in the last 2 years, here in Venezuela has happened a very important process. In the meanwhile, we have been stabilizing the economic situation and political situation. We have started this process of deepening the project of Bolivarian socialism, which is centered in the self-governance. And in the whole country, you have more than 5,000 communes, which is the instance of people's organization in the territory. We have communes in more than the 90% of the populated territory of our country. And in the last 2 years, we have had this process of, in the meanwhile, we have been recovering the national income. This extra income goes directly to the communes. And the method for that has been established as national people's consultation, where basically each commune established the priorities and established some projects, community projects, that should be executed in order to attend the most important issues of the territory. And then all the population goes to vote, not to choose a person, instead to choose a project. So for example, here in my territory, I have chose the project related to the water system. And that's the one that has been elected because most of the people voted for that. And then that project has been actually executed not by the national government or the regional government or the local government. Instead, it has been executed by the communal government. So 5,300 communes have been executing since the last year more than 35,000 projects in the whole country, which are something like 300 million of dollars executed directly by the self-governance system, by the communes. So that's Venezuelan reality. Instead of all the things that you hear about Venezuela and the difficulties about dictatorship, our problems is far from dictatorship. We thought that actually dictatorship is the US, where the police could kill someone only to protest for the terrible policy of migrancy that you have right now, for example. Well, and the last issue that I want to mention, comrades, is that we are mobilized. We think that it's important to mobilize here. That's our culture, our political culture, in order to defend peace, in order to defend stability, in order to demand the liberation of our president. But at the same time, we are actually very worried because we don't see that this is an attack only against Venezuela. What we are seeing now is the deployment of a new era of what they have called like Monroe Doctrine Reloaded by Trump, which has stated a strategy of recovering the whole hegemony of the US in the whole world. And they are starting by attack and aligning Latin America and the Caribbean. So basically, when you see all this military deployment in the Caribbean, that is not just against Venezuela, that is against the whole region and progressively against the whole world. That could be like some kind of hypothesis, but no. In the last 2 weeks, you have heard that directly from Trump. He said, now this is a warning for everyone who doesn't align to our interests. We have to rebuild this Monroe Doctrine. They have, of course, written it before in the National Security Strategy document that we think it's important that all our militants and everyone has to read and study in order to know what they are trying to impose to the whole humanity. And at the same time, you can see this attempt to promote a new governance system. But like, for example, you have seen like in the last months that they have been promoting and supporting some president candidacies in Honduras, in Argentina, and now where they can't control the presidency, they basically took it military and they invented any excuse in order to extract him, in order to kidnap him and force a change, a political change. So that's an important danger for our region. If we start to naturalize that, if we start to allow that, we are opening a very dangerous door to Latin America, the Caribbean, and the whole world because he won't stop. And you can see some examples of that. He threatened the president of Colombia. He said that they have to attack over there. Actually, the president of Colombia had the necessity to spoke to him and actually try to achieve some agreements because what can he do? Is he gonna face militarily the US? Is that possible? Also, we have seen the same threats to Mexico. He mentioned that they will start to put some territorial attacks in Mexico. He also threatened Cuba. He said that now all they need is to promote a military attack in Cuba. Now they have this all aggressive attack against Greenland, which is actually against Europe also. So basically, what we are seeing now is someone that I don't know. Some people think that it's a madman doing mad things. I think that it's more complicated than that. And we need to unite from all the social movements, political organizations, and we need to put pressure in the streets, in the social networks, in the media, in any possibility, individually and both collective. We need to condemn this situation and we need to put pressure in the governments. We need to say, hey, we need to condemn that situation. We need to stop that. We need to put pressure in the international institutions. In our case, we think that it's important to put pressure in CELAC, in the UN is practically dead, but actually we need to put pressure there also. We should put pressure even in the BRICS. We should to say, hey guys, you need to put together in order to stop all this madness because all of us, all humanity needs a new world order not based in imperialism. We need a multi-center and pluripolar world order, but we need to fight for that because if we don't do that, we thought that maybe we will have like all this imposition of a new hegemony, a new recolonization process from the US, centering in military force and also economic war and political pressure. So basically, comrades, what we are seeing is that we think that we need to answer to question ourselves for whom the bell tolls at this moment, and I think that they are actually ringing for us, and we need to put together and to have some action. In the case of Venezuela, we think it's important that we all mobilize to condemn the intervention, to promote and to demand the liberation of Nicolas Maduro, to defend the sovereignty of Venezuela, but at the same time, we need to put together a whole people's front against Trump. We need to stop all that threat of recolonization of our planet, and that should be a common cause at this moment. So that's it, comrades. Those are the main issues that I want to share. Maybe some discussions about it. I don't know. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hernán. So, Acting President Delcy Rodriguez has a history uh, with her father being murdered. Can you tell us more about her history? A lot of people in the United States, just are now hearing her name for the first time. And because they don't know her history, it's, rumored that she is actually turning on him, or, she's the one that traded him for power in Venezuela. And, media in the United States doesn't show that when she was sworn in, Nico Maduro was by her side, Nicolas Maduro's son. So, can you just explain a little bit about Delcy Rodriguez?
Nancy Rodriguez is part of the national political direction of Bolivarian Revolution since many years ago. She has had some important responsibilities in the government. She has been foreign affairs minister. Then she has been vice president so far till today. She had been also minister for oil industry, and she had been also the political responsible, the vice president for economic matters here in Venezuela, specifically in this blockade era. Also, I have to mention that politically, uh, when she was her father is called Jorge Rodriguez, which is has been killed by the dictatorship in the past century. He was part of the revolutionary forces that struggles against the far right dictatorship here in Venezuela. And she has, with his brother, also called Jorge Rodriguez, they, since little kids, they have been part of the same political organization that Maduro was part when he was young. So basically, this is people that know each other since they were children, and they were part of this socialist organization since a lot of decades ago, even before the Bolivarian Revolution. And after that, they joined with Hugo Chavez in the 80s, and they have been joining the part of the different forces, the revolutionary forces that were part of the coalition that then give, gave birth to the Bolivarian Revolution. So it's an historical background from her family, from her militants, and even from her responsibilities in the government. They have been trying to promote these ideas about treason and I don't know what, basically because this is the way that the Western powers think. But here in Venezuela, what we have been building in the last 27 years, if a Bolivarian movement with different levels of direction, uh, and all these levels of direction are all united right now, following the guidelines that Maduro gave us. Just thinking in the possibilities that we had in this scenario. And Delcy Rodriguez is basically performing the duties that Maduro designed for her. So, as the same way that you have Diosdado Cabello, Jorge Rodriguez, and all the national spokespersons, everyone is doing the part that they need to do. If you see, well, of course, that is something that you can see from Canada because you have all this blockade of information where you only have misinformation and fake news. But here in Venezuela, what we have seen all during these 2 weeks, it's all these national spokespersons working together in order to defend the country in a very difficult situation. And I want to be honest in this with you, comrades. What we are facing right now is like a hostage situation. They basically kidnap Maduro, but they also hostage. They are making this hostage situation with us, with the whole country. Basically, what they're saying, if you don't do what we say that you need to do, we will bomb you. Trump actually said that they have a second wave of attacks prepared if it's necessary. And of course, they have all these military deployment in order to guarantee the ruling of a country. And that is something that I have to say also, comrades. They have been very literal to mention we need to govern Venezuela. We will enter the transnational oil companies over there to rule the oil business. And we will recover all the losses that we have had during the Bolivarian revolution years. So that's the threat that we are facing right now. And we basically are resisting from the ways that we know. The mass people mobilization that maybe you haven't seen those pictures, but we are mobilizing in the streets all the days since this attack started, and at the same time trying to develop all the diplomatic channels in order to defend our sovereignty. What you have seen Delcy Rodriguez stated these last days, she mentioned, we're here to protect the peace. We are here to guarantee the government of the Bolivarian country. And we are here to demand the liberation of Nicolas Maduro. And that's our reality. We don't have any chance of treason. We are basically bullied and threatened by the most important and genocide empire that our century and our history has knew before.
Delcy Rodriguez accused Zionism of being involved. Can you explain a little bit about what the opinion of Venezuela is?
Well, as maybe you know, Venezuela has been against Israel attacks against Palestine since always. Since Hugo Chavez, we have always been against the Israel state position. And of course, in these last 2 years of this genocide against Palestine, we have been absolutely against, condemning internationally that. So those are maybe the main reasons, because Israel has always been against Venezuela, against Bolivarian revolution since the very beginning. So we have had Mossad operatives here in Venezuela. Some of the terrorists attacking Venezuela have been trained by the Mossad. We have had some examples of that, like Lawrence Saleh and another ones. And particularly in this attack, we have some proofs. It's not my competence to mention that, but we have known by public declarations that some of the different levels of attack that we have had, the different layers of the attack that we have suffered 2 weeks ago, one of them probably came from Israel, about jamming the whole signal of our defense system. And of course, we think that in an ideological and political level, the Zionism is one of the main centers of the ideological position, both Trump and the different international elites that are aligning in order to control the oil in Venezuela, in order to stop the whole integration system, international system that Venezuela has promoted. And of course, they are against sovereignty and the possibility to build an alternative to the disaster of capitalism and civilization model of the West, which is what we call socialism, of an alternative to all that disaster. So I think that maybe when Delcy talks about the whole Zionist against attack against Venezuela, he mentioned all these levels, the historical attacks that they have had, the role that they could have in the attack of 2 weeks ago, and of course the role that they have in all these international political allied and plots of elites against Venezuela, fascism, white supremacy, elites from the Silicon Valley, Zionism. This is part of the whole plot of elites that it's mixed against Venezuela and against Latin America and the Caribbean.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the experience on January 3rd? And, there's questions about how the lights all went off everywhere at once. I don't think that United States is very informed about how often the electrical grid is attacked in Venezuela. Can you explain about that experience as well?
Well, since 2019, we had this first national attack, this U.S. attack against the national system of electricity. These were like a very tragic situation 6 years ago. We had something like 5 days without any lights. And as you can see in a book written by John Bolton, one of the advisors of the U.S. government, he said, literally, he said, well, we thought that when we cut the power, it will start the chaos. But that didn't happen, so we didn't know what happened there. What happened was basically that we are a mobilized and organized people which has a culture of resistance that they can understand. But from there, of course, we know that they have these capacities in order to sabotage our electric system. What we have faced 2 weeks ago in the attacks of January 3rd was just not an electrical system attack. We has all these simultaneous attack to some defense systems, but also to some military installations, but also communication installations, but also civilian areas, and mainly all of them focus in the attack against Maduro, because they were trying to cancel and to nullify each of different elements that compound the defense system to protect Maduro. And that simultaneous attack happened in order that you can have like a picture. Venezuela has 24 different regions, states, we call them. And this simultaneous attack has happened in 4 different states, all of them in the center area of our country, the north of the country, the north center of the coast of our country. These 4 states has been Aragua, Miranda, La Guaira, Caracas. The fourth has been simultaneously attacked in order to nullify the defense system, the protection system, the possibilities to counterattack, and of course the possibilities to protect Maduro, to move from one point to another. And then they siege all these main attack in the center of Caracas, in what we call Fuerte Tiuna, where we have this residential area. In that area, you have Maduro also living there. So they have this cruel attack. Just today, you can see a Cuban president, our brother Miguel Diaz-Canel, talking about the whole cruelty of that attack and how they basically massacred our brothers, both from Venezuela and from Cuba, which are basically the same nation. We are the same people. Not about these whole ideas of dictatorship and I don't know what. Basically, because we are brothers fighting against imperialism, against capitalism, against oppression, and fighting for real freedom of the people. So, what I want to mention with that is that was a terrible attack where they slaughtered a lot of people, and they fear also they make some terrifying situation for other people. But that was like some kind of belt of Caracas that where they cut the power, which was like the belt where they transport some different aerial ships that attack and then took Maduro and kidnapping. But the rest of the city and the country have lights because that's actually part of the evil of some people which is specialized in the war and in the terror. They attack in the dawn. They attack in the dawn from Friday to Saturday in a holiday evening. So basically, they were trying to terrify all the population to see what they are capable to do. So we had lights in order that we can have the cell phones and share all these terrible images of explosions and attacks. So they were basically intimidating the whole population. They were sending us a message. So the answer to what you asked before is that they just cut the lights in some level where they need to operate, but the rest of us had the lights in order to spread the terror of this cruel attack.
Reminds me of when Chavez got kidnapped as well, but they were able to stop it before he got out of the country, or they took him out of the country. Can you tell me about what international support, what other governments Venezuela is seeing support, and in what ways?
So, since this attack, it has been kind of, we think that it has like kind of backfired the international opinion because we have seen even far right leaderships stating against the attack. Like, for example, Meloni in Italy, or even Le Pen in France. All of them stated against this attack. And even most of the governments condemned this military attack against Venezuela. So that was kind of backfire. Of course, you have then the whole far right belt aligned to the U.S. The shame belt, which is Israel, Argentina, supporting the attack. Uh, then you have all these level in the ground. As far as we know, in the U.S., he don't have also the support for this attack. And one of the expressions of that has been the mass mobilization. We have seen street demonstrations in different cities of the U.S., also in different cities of the whole region. We have seen in Mexico, in Argentina, in Colombia, in Honduras, in basically most of the countries of our regions. We have seen demonstrations against this U.S. attack in Venezuela. So the response has been interesting. That's the reason that we think that it's important that we now discuss about the challenges that we have. Because we think that it's important, on the one hand, some people need to put together in order to demand the liberation of Nicolas Maduro. And I want to mention in that matter that it's important to start a process of uh, reflection about our previous mistakes, because a lot of people talks about in the left or the progressive level talks about, no, Nicolas Maduro is a dictatorship, he's against human rights, he's against all of that. Comrades, have not a real basis. Uh, you're just feeding yourself with fake news. Sorry to tell you, but that's the reality. If you want to know the reality about Venezuela, I have to tell you that Nicolas Maduro is a working union leader from all his life. He's a decent man from the barrio, from the grassroots here in Venezuela. He has always been the second in the line with Hugo Chavez. He has always been like a leader. I think it's impressive how Maduro was able to take this thesis of socialism from the commune posed by Hugo Chavez and give it more concrete expressions in our country. So if you can come here now at Venezuela, you will see all a political system built in the last years, which is basically centered in a democratic system, far from the ones that you can see in the West, where you can see, well, Europe is, all of them are between monarchies and bipartisan parliaments, which is basically a dictatorship of the elites. And the US is an indirect system where the elites control everything. And we kind of laugh if it wasn't tragic when we hear about human rights, because here in Venezuela we prevent and protect human rights. A lot of people that they are now saying that are political prisoners are actually terrorists that try to promote fascist actions against population, and they are basically in jail because they did that. Because we can't let that happen. We can promote and naturalize the fascism of parts of the policies. And that's the reality of Venezuela. But at the same time, I want to discuss about what happened to human rights in the US, where you can see the state killing Protestants, peaceful Protestants, not even protesting, just driving his car, and you just kill him in the front of everyone. And that's something very, very common in the US. And on the difference of another things that could happen here in Venezuela, where you research and you condemn if anyone from the public force takes some action that can violate human rights. In this particular case in the US, it's an state policy. You can see the president saying, yes, we need to do that. We are doing it and we are doing it right. So it's a state policy. It's a terror state against human rights, against political rights. So now, comrades, what I want to mention with this point is that we need to discuss about the things that we are putting, the informations that we are actually consuming, but actually discussing in what is the reality that we are having right now. And at the same time, regarding to that, because I was mentioning that it's important to have a front to demand the liberation of Nicolas Maduro, but at the same time, we need to put together a front against Trump, which is basically to face the elites of the world that are trying to impose a new recolonization model with all this Don Road doctrine, which is basically to impose by the military and economic force the hegemony in our region. And I don't know if it's only in our region, because I've seen all the threats against Iran, all the threats against Greenland. So it's important to discuss about all these things.
Thank you so much. I'm going to open the floor now to questions. You can raise your hand with the React, or if June, you have some questions from the chat.
Yeah, we have several in the chat, so I'll go through them one by one in the order they came in. First is what is the relationship between the commune government and the presidential government? Are communes separate from the national government?
Yes. You know, it's interesting that you can come here, Conrads, and to see directly how it works. What we have been trying to put together is what President Maduro has called a people systems of governance, which means to establish like a whole structure where you can have this relation mechanisms between the national government, the regional government, the local government, and the communal government, but not at the bottom of the pyramid, but instead as the main grassroots, which should be the leading guidelines for the rest of the levels of governance. So in the last months, what we has been establishing is that in this system of cooperation and coordination between all these levels, in order to guarantee the better use of the resources, in order to guarantee the execution and the concretion of the priorities that you have in the communal level. So it's like a opposite subordination power system is what Hugo Chavez called like a new geometry of the power. And is related with this opposite relation where the communes are the most important level. I can have like a concrete picture for explain that. For example, in the last 2 years, the president has promoted that all the resources of both the regional government and the local government should be put in order to execute all the projects from the communes. And he actually has diminished the investment in these levels of government in order to prioritize to put it in the communes. So he's basically diminishing the power, the resources of the local, of the regional and local level in order to increase the power of resources for the communal level. But again, it will be interesting because that you can come here and see all of this because it's like a whole like a building process, like who is developing each day.
And next question we have is, what are the chances of a regional mutual security coalition between with Colombia, Brazil, Guyana, etc.?
Well, with Guyana particularly is difficult because in the last 5 years, Guyana has been taken as a hostage by the ExxonMobil. So basically, the ExxonMobil controls the Guyana government and has been instrumentalizing Guyana against Venezuela and in order to promote the interests of the oil exploitation of Exxon. Regarding to the whole region, we need to strengthen the mechanisms that we had before some years ago, more than 15 years ago, in Latin America, we have created this instance called CELAC, which is an alliance of the different governments of Latin America, but without the US and Canada, only Latin America and the Caribbean. So it's a non-aligned instance of integration between the governments. But of course, it has been like attacked by the different far-right governments that we have in the region, like for example, Chile, Argentina, Ecuador. They try to break these alliance conditions. Since the last months, when all this threat, all this military deployment from the US started, a lot of governments in the region has stated that they are worried about this whole situation and we need to strengthen the cooperation and integration. Maybe the one more advanced, of course, Venezuela has said that we need to build like a military alliance with, in order to protect our region, but also Colombia. Colombia mentioned that we need to also to rebuild this Bolivarian project of integration of the Gran Colombia as an instance of integration of our region. And he also mentioned the necessity of has this military integration. That's important to put it in the, I know, you know, in the statements, in the public opinion. Concretely, it will be more complicated. I think that it's important to state a political position. If at least Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela start to put together a position and to confront the US as a front, that could be an advancement for our region. And that's something that we need uh, to promote from our different organizations, from our different levels. We need to tense into integration. We need to promote, because sadly, I think that all this aggressive offense from Trump has took us by surprise. I will say that maybe to the whole region. But we need to go out from the surprise, and we need to start a process of regroupment and to have a common position in order to confront, to stop all these offensive.
Thank you. And next question we have is, how much control, if any, does the Venezuelan government have now over Citgo? Is the US basically taking over the entire oil supply?
You know, before these attacks, you know, Citgo is a branch of the oil industry, the Venezuelan industry, that is not in our country. It's overseas. So most of Citgo is in the US. So sadly, since 2015, the US, with their international measures, they start a process of stealing Citgo from us. So sadly, they controlled Citgo some years ago. And at this moment, it's kind of complicated because they are trying to force Venezuela to align to their policies. And we are trying to defend our sovereignty after an attack, of a military attack. So we have the threat. But at this point, they need to start to release some of the sanctions that they have in order that we can execute the different process of the oil industry. Like, for example, the different international oil companies need to have some guarantees that they are facing with our national industry. So what I'm trying to say is that it's like a like a contradictory situation where they have control and seize our assets, but at the same time, they need to release them in order to guarantee the whole system of production and distribution that the whole different oil companies need in order to make business in Venezuela.
Next question we have is, do you see possibilities for non-cooperation by Venezuelan citizens with U.S. attempts to take control within the country, for example, in the oil industry?
What can I say? Well, at this moment, we are severely threatened. So they are trying to make us cooperate. No, they are not trying to make us cooperate. They are trying to force us to do something. What we have been doing, and is what you can see from the statements from Delcy Rodriguez, is that we are defending our condition as a sovereign nation. So it's a tense uh, push situation between the two of us. Of course, they have a weapon in the hand and they are threatening us with that. And we are trying to defend peacefully our rights. So, the last things that we have been promoting before they kidnapped President Maduro, what he was proposing to the US is that we could cooperate in order to guarantee the oil production and that we can have a mutual cooperation, respecting ourselves as two nations with sovereignty in order to do that. And that's the same position that we are having right now. So what I'm trying to say is that we are trying to guarantee, for us, it's not contradictory to have this oil production in cooperation with international companies. But our important point here, our position here is that we are a sovereign country, and they need to respect our rights of a country. And that's kind of the push that we have right now with the US so far. I have to say that if they don't respect us, of course they will force us into a very messy situation. If we need to blow the whole oil industry, we will do it. But we don't want to go into that because that's not good for our country, that is not good for most of our people, and not good for our region. But that's the limit of our dignity and sovereignty and the oppression that they are trying to impose.
Thank you. Next question we have is, what would you say is the most honest, reliable source of information and news coming out of Venezuela, that is available to us in the US and that we can trust?
That's a tough question. we have these media, a little media here in Venezuela that we call, let me check the name a little, sorry. Just a minute, please. I don't remember the name of the media, but I can share with you a link because it's a national media that actually translate the news. So I think that could be a good media for you to check because they used to be serious about the information and they promote the main direct information, the official situation and reliable information about Venezuela. So I will share that with you. And of course, we as social movements have been building since the attacks, we have building this little bulletin of, of information for the social movements around the world. So I can also share that with you. That is not a media, it's just a humble initiative from us in order to fight against the whole misinformation and the fake news.
What about Telesur?
Telesur is a very good, of course, that's a very reliable media of information. Of course, Telesur, he is here in Venezuela, but it's not just information from Venezuela, from the whole Latin America. It's a very good, it's a very good media.
Thanks for that. We had a question from someone who I'm just catching up on here. So in terms of organizing, are there potential allies or anyone that can be influenced within the US government who groups like Poor People's Army or other organizing groups can work with?
So I think yes, we need to put together Poor People's Army and all the different social movements, platforms, individualities, everyone who is, well, I think that that could be different levels. For me, it's important to have one level of defense of Bolivarian revolution and our struggle and our right, legitimate right to our sovereignty. But at the same time, I think that there is another level, which is everyone against Trump. I think it's a more white alliance about Trump because as maybe some people mentioned, even some people from the cultural, you know, the cultural business. Like for example, Mark Ruffalo says he's the worst person in the world, and he's right. And I think that a lot of people could agree with that. So it's important to make all these wide alliance in order to stop it, because as you know, this year they have the midterm elections. It's important for us that he loses because that will diminish his possibility to keep attacking the peoples. Of course, then is the empire. I don't think that the US is very far from the Trump intentions. Actually, he's a consequence of different elites. But I think it's important to stop Trump because maybe like a Democrat leader will be also imperialist, but maybe not so dangerous as Trump.
So that's all the questions that we have in the chat right now. So anyone else who has questions, I encourage you to either raise your hand in the React feature on Zoom, or you can place them in the chat.
I do want to ask Matt's question. He said, can you address some of the allegations of disappearances by the Maduro government of political protesters against the government? Some Venezuelan Americans here say that relatives in Venezuela have been killed for speaking out against Maduro. And could you address the political prisoners that are there and how the state handles opposition or attacks on the government?
I mean, all of that are fake news. Maybe we can establish a channel of communication where you can like send me the name of each people that you say which has been disappeared in the by the Venezuelan government. And since it's a lie, we will check if that person is alive or where is it. But there is no disappear people here in Venezuela. Opposed to what happens in the US, basically. But here in Venezuela, that doesn't happen. As I mentioned before, I can put an example of the actions of the states. First, Hugo Chavez promoted a whole process of reforming the security forces of the state. So he changed the doctrine, the military doctrine, and also the security forces doctrine into a more progressive one with more respect for human rights. So that's a process that happened in Venezuela, and that's important. You can feel it in the streets if you can come. And at the same time, I can tell you that in the last 11 years, where you have had this climax of the whole offensive against Venezuela, of course, the highest point has been the military attack recently. But before that, you have attempt to kill Maduro. You have attempt to in an invasion with mercenary groups like Bay of Pigs in Cuba. You have also the attempt to put the UN forces in order to have this humanitarian intervention by force. You have this attempt to create a parallel government. You remember Guaido. And you have all these different things, and one of them were to promote violence in the streets. And this violence in the streets were like a whole operation coordinated by the US. But by the way, in coordination with Israel as well, they both train some young people from Venezuela, and they put this logistical support from the CIA, and they promote all this violence in 2017 in the streets in Venezuela. They call it guarimbas. And in the last years, they actually make a movie about that, because why not? It's the US. They put everything in a Hollywood format in order to rewrite history. So you don't have a Bolivarian revolution supported by the people. No, you have like all these things that you created, which is a freedom fighter process that actually didn't exist. What yes happened, what yes exists is that these terrorist groups try to kill people in the streets, try to kill people from the national forces, from the military forces, in order to promote chaos and to promote a coup d'etat. So they were forcing militarily the forces of the state. And of course, trained people, in order to promote that, were put in jail. And that people, it's in Venezuelan jails, according to the Venezuelan laws. But of course, what you can see in the whole media is that they are political prisoners, and they have no rights, and they have no stuff. Yes, they have rights, and they are in the jails. We don't think that they are political prisoners. We think that that's an insult to all the people that actually politically try to promote changes in Venezuela and in the whole countries. When you have military trained people who is trying to destabilize or to promote coup d'etat, it's not a political prisoner. It's another thing. And in the past year, we have this situation where they also promote this sector of trained people and some youngsters from gangs to promote violence against grassroots leaders of Chavismo. So they threat them to kill them. They actually kill some people. They actually attack some people. And the state, of course, put in jail some of those peoples because they were promoting violence, fascist violence. And they are in jail, of course, as the laws has to do. And very differently, by the way, I was seeing the whole protest in the last days in the US, and I was seeing if that kind of repression you have here in Venezuela, they will be doing like a big fuss about it. You don't have that kind of repression here in Venezuela. And when we have some repression, it's not against people protesting. It's about people trying to attack the government in order to to force a coup d'état. So that's different. If that happened in the US, I think that probably they will kill them publicly because that's the kind of democracy that you have in the US. But again, comrades, what I honestly would like to establish is that we have this cooperation and this dialogue in order to have these channels of communications to be an underground level, sadly, to against misinformation and fake news, which is basically the things that we have been feeding, we have been fed during the last years. I wanna invite you to know the real Venezuela, to know the real Maduro, because this whole situation could be like some kind of call of reflection for all of us that maybe during the last months and years have been kind of lazy and have been reading and consuming all the crap that they have sell to us. Maybe if I try to find, and sorry if I put you as an example, if I try to find in the mainstream media what they call about the Poor People's Army or about the social movements in Canada, they will sell me the same bullshit or even worse. So we need to establish, and that's the reason that I'm really thankful to you, very grateful in order to have this possibility of direct conversation in order to cut the crap and put the truth between us in the middle. This is an important moment for the internationalism, for solidarity. So you can come here to Venezuela and see the reality because maybe I can talk aloud and you can say, well, Hernán is telling something that I don't know. Well, come here and you will see the reality by yourself.
So the next question we have is there's a lot of confusion in the US around the latest elections and the amount of refugees leaving Venezuela. Can you speak to us more about that?
Refugees live in Venezuela. They are not refugees living in Venezuela. They are migrants from Venezuela. And that's something that I want to mention because it's important. Some countries like the US, Spain, and even Ecuador, Colombia at some point start this process, which I think it's really disrespectful and it's not good for the whole migrants struggles. They have created this fake status for Venezuelan migrants. For example, if you come to Spain and you say, I'm persecuted, I'm a refugee from Venezuela, I have escaped. And they will say, okay, sign here, and you will be accepted into Spain. And you will have like some perks. You have some special attention from the state. And that actually generated that a lot of people which just migrate from Venezuela for different reasons, they sign this condition. They put that as a condition. It was the better channel in order to enter in that country. So that happened in Spain, that happened in Colombia, that happened in Ecuador, that happened in the US, in order to promote a fake refugees status. The reason that I said that that is disrespectful and that's not good for the humanity is that we know that from different countries, we actually had refugees. The people who goes from Venezuela, there is no one persecuting them, or even so, there is no risk situation. But they have been a policy of promoting migration from Venezuela that, by the way, then backfired for some countries, like for example the US, that then start all this process to cry because of the migrants from Venezuela and they wanted to turn them back. It has been like a very an important leitmotif in the Trump's government. But what I want to emphasize here is that we don't have any refugees going from here. There is no one persecuted in here. What we have had is the situations generated by the blockade of the different of the last 11 years. They have decreased with these sanctions. They have decreased the possibility of Venezuela to sell oil, to buy capital goods for the inner economy. They have frozen different bank accounts of Venezuela. Venezuela couldn't access to the financial and bank system at international level. So if we want to buy something or sell something, we can't. So all of these measures, and of course they took Citgo, they took some bank accounts, they took some gold reserves overseas. Like for example, the UK basically stole the gold from Venezuela, which was in their bank. So all these things decrease the national income of Venezuela in 2019 and 2020. The national income of Venezuela uh, decreased into 1% of our previous income. 1%. Figure what could be for a country to survive with 1% of the previous income that you had before. Of course, that generated very bad situations in our country, and a lot of people flew away trying to look for the well-being situation that they had here before in the years of Bolivarian Revolution. And of course, what they found were neoliberalism. They didn't find this well-being situation, but they adapt. They adapt and they curse Bolivarian Revolution and socialism, and they were manipulated. So they said, if we had a bad situation, it's because of Bolivarian Revolution, because US said that that's the main reason, and the government who allows me to come to this country also tells me that, and actually makes me sign something in order for me to enter to that country that says that I'm a political refugee or asylum or any other thing. So that's a key issue to discuss because it's one of the most important fakes and one of the most critical operations that they have put in order to overthrow Bolivarian revolution from different far right countries. I want to just mention for finish that intervention that during the COVID pandemic, these countries of the region, since they were basically putting in the streets most of the workers, of course they did the same with the Venezuelans. So a lot of those Venezuelans have to came back to Venezuela. Why? Because Venezuela protect people. And they had to put together, and some of them, when they came back, we tell them, well, but you have this thing that you say that you are refugee. How are you coming here back? No, no, please let me go back. I just signed that because they made me do. Well, of course, come back, but don't do it again. You can sign something that says that you are political refugee or asylum if it's not true. That's a very critical situation. We should never again play with that kind of things because in Colombia, the paramilitary far right paramilitary forces actually kills and persecute people. And that status of refugees was created for that kind of situation. Here in Venezuela, we don't have that. So it's not good that you try to instrumentalize that kind of status in order to attack a Bolivarian process. Oh, and you also asked about latest elections. In 2024, we have presidential election. Instead of all the sanctions that we had, we went to a national election, presidential election. And most of the people, 60% of the population vote, no, 60%, 60% of the people that went to vote. And the people that went to vote were something like 40% or 50% of the population. And from that people that went to vote, 60% vote for Nicolás Maduro. But of course, since Maria Corina Machado has the support of all media and the US and the whole social networks and stuff, they decide to say what used to happen, that the reality for Venezuela is a different one. So they said, no, they lose. The presidential election wasn't won by Nicolás Maduro. And they have prepared this whole, they have all this plan of destabilization with all these groups that I mentioned before that were trying to attack grassroots leaderships. But instead, they try to activate that plan. The state promote the peace, put everyone that has to be put in jail, and defend the electoral resultations, the electoral election for Nicolás Maduro. What I can say about that, if people have some doubts about it, is that they say that most of the population vote for them. But here in Venezuela, never in 2004, neither in 2025, has gone to the streets all that people that supposed to vote for them. Even in this moment where they supposed to have liberated Venezuela because US kidnapped Maduro, you don't have anyone celebrating that they took him. So my question to that people who question the elections here in Venezuela is, where is all that people that's supposed to vote for them? Because they can say, and that's important to describe, they can say no because they are afraid because the whole repression. That's something that only you can say in another country. But if you live here, Conrad, you won't tell me about that crap. I can go to the streets and I can talk to a cop who is against us, or a military enforcer which is against us. So that's, how can I tell it? It's like, that's crap for export, but that doesn't exist here in Venezuela.
Thank you so much, Hernán. Is there anything more that you didn't get to touch on that you want to talk about?
Well, I think I just want to emphasize, comrades, that it's important right now that we can, I think it happens a lot during the last 2 weeks that some comrades, and we thank that a lot, write us and tell us, we are supporting you, we are with Venezuela. That's important. But we need that you put that support in the social networks, in the streets, in the medias. So in any possibility, you have to tell the world that you are against the US aggression, that you ask for the respect of sovereignty of Venezuelan people, and you ask for the liberation of Nicolás Maduro. So that's something that it's important that you do it individually, but also as a collective, and also to promote others to do the same thing. And as I mentioned several times, it's important that we make that as a united front against all this Trump agenda, because that's not just Trump agenda. That's the world elites agenda that they put Trump to make the dirty work. But this is a supremacist, a white supremacist elite, a high-tech Zionist agenda of the capital system of the of the elites of the world. So it's important that we united right now to confront that, to stop that. And we, of course, thanks very much, Conrad, for the opportunity to have this window to talk about the reality of Venezuela. I'm here anytime that you need me in order to exchange information. Now that we finish this conversation, I will share with you some links of the medias that I mentioned in order that you can have this possibility to have. And always we can discuss with me and other comrades in order to have always this possibility to have. This is a moment where it's important to have communication. They call about the peer-to-peer communication. I think it's important to have this people-to-people communication in this moment of humanity.
Muchas gracias, Hernán. Qué presentación tan berraca.
Gracias, Fe.
Yeah, I
Muchas gracias.
appreciate you very much. We look forward to staying connected and providing support in whatever way that we can here from the United States. We want to invite people to follow us on Instagram or Facebook at PPEHRC, or go to poorpeoplesarmy.org. And we really need to take responsibility for organizing here in the United States. Not only is it our responsibility for here in the country, but globally, due to what is done with our tax money in terrorizing the rest of the world. Thank you again, Hernán, and thank you everybody who came out. Have a great night.
Thank you very much, comrades.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We will prevail. Venceremos.
Venceremos.